Hello, and welcome to video number 2 of covering piston engines, timer piston engines, and it's branched out at the moment, so a bunch of different piston engines in this game, Scrap Mechanic. So, what I would like to cover in this video is, firstly, that acknowledge that in the last video I made, I was wrong in a couple of parts because I didn't really specify that it was for my own designs. So it wasn't, not in general. It was all for my own designs that they'd reached their limit and stuff. I've done something very, very cool. So in the last video, a gentleman by the name of Ben Bingo came up and he basically talked to me about some of his really cool piston designs, and then I got them, and then I said, hey, why don't I just benchmark them? Make like a really cool, like, I don't know, make like a sort of performance ratio kind of thingamajig, so that I could figure out, well, not really figure out what, not really the best piston engine, but following a certain ratio, sort of like plot data and analytics and sort of find sort of the bounds of piston engines, what's holding them back, and why are they good in some areas, and I'll explain that a bit later. So I've benchmarked about, I think, 60 engines, 60 piston engines. So I went around YouTube, and a lot of these are just, I just went and I just like, oh, he's got a tutorial from Al Magma or this guy called Allstrak, and then just every person I could find, I'd build their tutorial piston engine like this, and if it didn't work, I'd have to tune it and kind of fix it and stuff. And ooh, that's a subscribed one, but yeah. And then so these are just the ones around YouTube. Then I went to the collections on the Steam Workshop and got a ton. And then I also went to like page 30, downloading every single sort of interestingly different piston engine that I could find. And then yeah, so I just benchmarked them. And the benchmarking process, I take a value of their RPM, how fast they're spinning. So if I get my own engine here, to explain what, no, actually I should first I need to cover what I did wrong in the last video before I go any further. So the problem was, I didn't really explain my engines very well, basically. And I also limited myself to that one design, sort of a thing. But basically my massive piston engine, I was like, oh, this is the longest it can be. It wasn't really, but for the design and the way that I put the sensors and constructed each one, sort of like the basic way that everyone does, that was the biggest that I could do. I wish I had kept it. I don't know where that design is. But anyway, let me just quickly show what, how to make my engine. So what we're going to do first is we're going to make just a simple, like clock, logic repeater, logic clock thing. So it'll constantly activate and deactivate. So I just watch along. Just make a little triangle, XOR gate, and when you flick the switch, it starts up, which it goes on off quite fast, and basically I'll then use that plus a delay to then activate 2 pistons, and then if you can sync or if you can time it correctly, the 2 pistons can then start spinning an axle that they are mounted to. So we'll set this one as a total fire. So now, after we've built that timer, this one is going to be the total fire time of the pistons, and it'll fire the first one. Just that slims down the design. So this will be how long the pistons fire for, and then this one plus any other timers you place after that are going to be the delay between it and the previous piston. The other thing is if you have three timers in a line, and they're all set to the same delay, like this. With the imagine that these are the pistons in the engine. You can actually just hook this up to there because they will then fire at the same time. But you shouldn't actually do that. There's a little trick to increase the efficiency. I'm not focusing on what I'm saying. Okay, so now that you've got this set up and you've got the little 2-piston engine, you'll offset it by a certain amount of degrees. All you then do is just press the fire button. And we're on a lift. Hold up. So they'll fire in sequence like that. Obviously, they'll be on bearings and stuff, and they'll be angled and having fun. That's kind of funny. But yeah, that's the basic principle for the timer engines. And if you want more engines, you'll just offset them. And if you want them to fire, if you are carrying a heavier load, you'll increase that tick rate. And then you'll say increase the delay or something. And then actually what you want to do. So that's a 180 degree offset because it's a when they fire at the exact same time, but inverse each other. You can sort of assume that's 180 degrees. This one, where this one fires half the actual full firing time, that would be a 90 degree offset. This doesn't make it very clear. Let me just show you. This is a little piston engine I made. So this is actually 4 pistons placed closely together, like so. And then I have them hooked up to this timer array, which it actually has to cross over. I'll show you why. It's because it's basically just the firing order of the pistons I had to figure out. That's too close to the ground. There we go. Like so. Right. So then I offset the 2 pistons from each other using this bearing right here. In the center here is a little glitched piston thing where you can actually mount the axle to the engine. It's just doing it like that means that all you need to do is just spawn this in and put 2 bad wheels on this bad boy, and it's ready to rock and roll, if you know what I mean. It'll just start spinning. You don't actually need to separately mount the axle to anything or mount the wheels. Actually, quick demo on the glitched piston. All you need is a bearing. So you put down a pipe, a bearing. So what this just allows you to have, like, to support the axle and deliver power through it. So these 2 sides are connected, as well as being able to spin while being connected to this body. That's all the piston does. It's kind of like how in other design, it's kind of like how, say, in one of these should have it. So you see, so in this design, how this piston phases through these 2 supporting bars. It's basically the exact same, just a lot smaller. So what you then you also need a controller to stop them from spinning. Another YouTuber, Mr. Ice Glaceon, has this tutorial, and I did that wrong. Okay, it's a T-piece with a bearing. Mount the T-piece, boom. Put another bearing, and you'll mount the side that you're going to actually... you're actually going to mount this side to the axle, and then the power is going to be delivered through this, and then this is going to go to your frame to support the axle. So then what we do is we use our lift to lift that bad boy up. We get the piston that we didn't get before, place that there, take the lift off, and boom, done. Now oh no. Okay, well, to make this easier, you can put a little thing on it like that. So as an example, we'll take that, mount that on there, put a little T-piece like this just to show that it's going to spin, and then we'll just quickly mount this to the frame. So you can see it's now supported because it's connected to the body. And then I'm just going to put an electric engine on this side. Like so. And then we'll do that. Put it on the bottom. So you'll see when we power this electric engine, the axle is completely supported, but you can deliver power through it. So that's all that is. Right. So yes, so with this little timer design, I have that same repeating little thing here that runs into this timer, which is your starting timer, and then that connects to the one on the opposite side, then it connects to one on the same side, and then it connects to one over there. So and what that does is it just fires the pistons in an alternating pattern. So that one, this one, that one, and then this one. And then I can have because I've got so many pistons on this, they're a bit more redundant, so I can actually reduce the delay between from firing each piston to the next. So what I'll do is I'll actually just slow it down. So I think I'll quadruple everything. And hopefully that should work. Like so. It'll just be a bit jerky. Heck, that's jerky. We'll halve the speed. We'll halve the speed. That should make it less bad. Okay, so this is a good example to show. It doesn't do that hitching thing normally. It's just doing it now because it's not timed correctly. But this is sort of how it runs at that max speed. This little engine here. Okay. So that's just an explanation of the timer engines that I had in the previous video. And I did talk about the sensor engines and then adding more pistons to a timer engine, so having 4 in a line or having the 2 on each side of the axle like that and stuff. But I'm not going to recover that, even though some of it was wrong. So if you disagree with it and you don't know why you've disagreed with it, probably just accept that I'm wrong. I'll take that. I'll take that penalty. It's all good. Right. Now, what I wanted... Okay, back to the original thing, which I went off on, but now I want to get back to. Engines, benchmarking, and making a performance ratio for each engine based... Now, this performance ratio, this all-amazing performance ratio, it depends on the RPM of the engine. It's max RPM under no load. It depends on the maximum torque of the engine just before it caps out, just before the engine goes to 0 RPM. So it means that my RPM and torque values you can't put together because it won't give you a proper horsepower. It'll give you a massively inflated one that doesn't actually make sense. So don't take these values as they were done in the same testing. They were done in 2 separate tests with no load and the maximum load the engine could possibly take. Okay, and then I also factor in the bearing, which thinking of it's kind of like the bearings are the complexity of the engine, basically. Like more bearings is going to make your game run slower. And that's why I've factored in the bearings as an important variable. The next one is the cost of the engine. So it's the actual the cost of the engine. I've basically put as all the pistons involved with actually turning the axle over. So as an example, this is an inline 4 engine. I only count these 4 pistons and their maximum component cost, which is 9 components each, 1 to build and then 8 to upgrade to max, as the actual cost of the engine. I'm not going to count that one because it just makes it easier and it makes it sort of more standard. And then the last one, the last factor is the actual volume of space, the actual area the engine takes up, but it's the area of the engine. It's the area of the engine. Wow. It's the area after it's been like welded onto something. So it's not while it's on the lift, because you can get some engines that are larger on the lift and some that are smaller, basically. And then they'll change volume a little bit. And now how I measure volume is I'll take the XYZ sizes, the amount of blocks the engine takes up in the XYZ planes. So that's horizontal, vertical, and then depth. I don't count buttons as a full block, and I do count that as a full block because it's very necessary for the engine to function. So this engine would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It'll be 5 blocks wide times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks like tall, and it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 blocks long. And so that'll be the sort of, that's how I measure the volume of the engine. It's not very like specific, intuitive. I'm not sure. I think it's just easy, so that if someone makes like a V16, I don't have to then imagine the empty space that would be in the V16. Although I could possibly change this in the future. It'll just take me a little longer to actually estimate the volume of the engine that it takes up. But then again, like some engine designs, actually calculating the square volume like that is useful, because when you paste in your creation, like a V engine will likely be flat. And it'll take up a lot of this space when you paste it in, and then when it actually spawns in, it'll just go to its actual shape. And so that's why I'm taking the full volume like that. But what I can do I'm about to flick to a spreadsheet, but I'm about to flick to a spreadsheet where I've done all the calculations, and we're about to see a ton of numbers and stuff. Some analyzing and data analysis. Oh, we love data analysis on this channel. This is the first time, but now I'm setting it, the bench, right? Data analysis, okay? D, A, T. That's right. We love data. Data. We love data analysis on this channel, okay? And that's what we'll be doing. We're going to be heckin' going full out, and we're going to be absolutely, I can't explain how much we're going to do and what we're going to find out, and how we're going to grow together as a community. And we're going to finally beat those electric engine, gas engine, controller engine, idiots. You know what I mean? We're just going to absolutely destroy them with a massive giga-chad power of our piston engines. And that's the real purpose. The real purpose is family. That's the purpose. Okay, I'm going to go over to the spreadsheet. I'll catch you in a second. All right, here's the spreadsheet. Okay, this is the third time I've recorded this. Let's hope we get it right. So here I have the engines labeled with their creators and their name with an image of each engine. And then I have my measured values of RPM torque, the bearings in the engine, or the amount of bearings that are required to build the engine, the survival component cost, and the actual cubic volume of the engine. So in the creator column, it's just the creator of the engine, whether it's their YouTube name, or the one that I could find, or their Steam name, or their Steam name. And then I have the actual name of the engine that was given. Then I have an image just to help finding it. I have the RPM of the engine, and then I have the torque of the engine, the absolute maximum torque as the RPM approaches 0. And then I have the amount of bearings required. I think I've just said this. So yeah, the bearings, the component, and the volume. So then, with all these variables, I use the maximum RPM plus the maximum torque as the positive variables, and then the bearings, component cost, and volume as the negative variables. And so it'll be the positive divided by the negative, and then I also had to multiply the negative by 1,000, because then I can get normal numbers. But the positive divided by the negative, that gives me my performance ratio. And Yes. So I also benched in all of the different engine spreadsheets I have. I also benchmarked the basically the gas, electric, and controller engines for Scrap Mechanic. Interesting thing, the gas engine has so much higher torque than the electric engine. I thought it was the other way around, but apparently not. And then I also did the controller. So I will, after this, I'll show you what I did for the RPM and torque benchmarking. But for now, I'll just show you that I did a couple engines from YouTube, from Steam collections, and from pages 1 to whatever. Just as many as I could find, just to start off and to get a decent amount in. I also, like, if people update their engines, I don't know if I'll be able to cover that instantly, but I'll see if I can keep tabs on all these bad boys. So the different engines I benchmarked was some sensor engines. I tried to get as many, just any piston engine, but it ended up I also managed to accidentally get a spud gun engine in, which is it just ended up, it's just because I misread the name, but I wish there were more, but I couldn't find any more. So I found a bunch of about 59 sensor-based piston engines, so using a timing plate and stuff. I didn't find any suspension. There might have been some, but I didn't see them, or I wasn't searching for them. I did find one singular timer engine other than my own, and I also found one singular spud gun engine. Because Axial Potato, I'm like, oh, that's just, what, is he just calling his engine bad? No, it's because it actually uses potatoes and the recoil of the spud guns to start to rotate. It didn't have a very high torque, and it didn't have a very high RPM, but it's doing its best, okay? We just gotta give it that. So, right. Yes, to explain the performance ratio, it's just the RPM multiplying the torque, divided by the bearings component cost and volume added together, and then I multiply that number by 1,000. So there's a couple extra little numbers, little letters and numbers here to identify some cells, and I'll tell you what those bad boys do. So what they do is they're actually a ratio for the negative values, for the bad values. They're not negative, I'm just going to call them the bad values. So if you don't, so that you're going to get a performance ratio just based on those variables, and then multiplying those variables by 1 is just going to, it's not going to affect them. But say you don't care about the survival cost because you're only playing creative, and you don't care about the volume because you're a Giga Chad with absolutely massive creations, and you have a massive computer that can just handle this. And so what will happen then is the performance ratio is going to change. The order is going to change. So to show you an example, I just skipped charts. To show an example, we'll change all of these to 1, and we'll filter the values from Z to A. So this basically is from high to low. So we'll see that at the moment, factoring all the variables that I've measured, Mr. Bee's Knees, his creation is a tutorial on YouTube. You just have to, if you want to make it, when I made it, I just had to tweak the angle of the controller a bit. But his has a really high ratio, a full just a couple of percent above the one below it, one made by Ben Bingo. And the reason they're so good is obviously it looks like it's their volume and cost. But what we can do is we can say, okay, we don't care about the cost, and we don't care about the cost because we don't play survival. We can then reorder the thing and see, oh, his is still at the top. I wasn't expecting that, but now a lot of the order of the engines have changed under here. Icebound Glaceon has now jumped up because I think the cost was really dragged him down. And then all these other engines kind of stayed the same. Up the top of the graph, they generally do stay similar, but down the bottom, it's an absolute it's an actual bloodbath. They just up, down, left, right. They go absolutely ballistic trying to fight for the top dog position. So we also don't care about volume. Imagine obviously you don't care. And then we'll filter it again, and the entire order now changes because volume is such a large factor usually. And this Kine Anderer engine is now top dog. The top of the cream of the crop, you know what I'm saying? Because it's got such a high unloaded RPM, and then such actually a moderately good loaded torque or fully loaded torque, so until it reaches 0, that its ratio is so much higher. The one thing I will say is with all the kinds engines, they do run at a much lower RPM when under a high load. Mr. B's knees is still up there. He's still fighting strong. There are a couple outliers, and this is one of them. This is the locking crank by Ben Bingo, and this thing has the highest torque out of anything that I've measured. It's absolutely ridiculous. You'd have to, like, 22,000. You'd have to triple bearing a gas engine to equal the torque that this thing outputs. It's absolutely amazing. And then, also, this is another this is another outlier, another one by Ben Bingo, and it's because its RPM is just absolutely massive, but it has quite a low torque. But that's usually the trade-off. And actually, once I graph these, you'll see that trade-off occur. It'll be pretty interesting. So what I'm just going to do is... Oh, and you can also go over one as well. Say you very much care about bearings, but you don't care about cost. Then you can change this, and you can see that now, if I care about bearings a lot, some of Ben Bingo's creations get shunted down, and Kind's engines go up. Because somehow he just used 4 bearings for this. I don't know how he did it. He's a genius. He's a genius. Luckily, Ben Bingo's, yes, I said it, very reliable. This is a great engine, this one here. Testing it. So what I'll quickly do is I'll just mash Control-Z a couple times just to go back to the original. And then what we'll do is we'll just graph all the engines except the outliers and scrap mechanics engines. And the reason I'm doing that is because scrap mechanics engines kind of follow a normal distribution, and the outliers just make the graph so small you can't really interpret anything from it. Chart. Ow. So here we have a graph of the average RPM along the bottom versus the torque of the engine. And I don't know why the axis isn't there, but I'll just highlight the values and you can sort of see what they're at. So the highlighted value is the torque, and then the value with the blue square is the torque, and then the small one is the RPM. So this is very much because of the design. That's why we get this sort of right angle distribution where we have a clumped group at the beginning, and then we have a limit that we've apparently reached, and then we have some different designs that then that focus more on torque. And this perfectly shows the sacrifice you have to make. To get more RPM, you can't get as much torque out of the engine, and to get more torque out of the engine, you have to reduce your RPM. And this is mostly because of the designs of the engine. So this 308 4000 engine is, where does it sit? It's this V12 engine. So where you have strong supports, and the actual stroke length of the pistons is quite high. And the biggest problem that stops some of these engines from increasing their RPM is the stroke length of each piston, which increases the torque. If you have a high stroke length, it'll increase the torque. And then you have some of these other engines, like Kind's engines, where they have an incredibly high RPM and a moderately high torque. But their RPM is only so high because they use a much shorter stroke length. And so that's the sort of distribution we're looking at. The only thing is this graph doesn't actually factor in these, the bad variables. It doesn't factor those in. So with the V12, it sort of shows that, it's got great torque, it's got great RPM versus torque, but the thing is it takes up a massive space, a big volume. And that's just one problem with that one there. The thing is, interestingly, you get the sort of top out here around 4000, because these engines here, actually, that's the max resistance the controller bearing can give, around 4000. That's the max resistance. And unless you do a kind of like a funky thing in front of the controller on the load side of the axle, on like closer to, on the part of the axle that is directly connected to the testing machine, unless you do a few extra pistons there, you're not going to get much above 4000. And we see there's a massive clump down here where people have sort of focused on sort of the aesthetic side or making it really small and stuff. And we have a weird clump here, and I think that's another design variable that's caused that. But this is all time for another. I'm just explaining it at the moment. This is just basic, sort of like showing kind of what's happening. I'm hoping for a lot more before I do a pretty heckin' incredible, pretty like discerning graph that I've managed to figure out using, I think using a stacked bar graph. I can show both the positives and the negatives in one spot, and I can also use my ratios over there to change them. So I'll be doing all that later. But for now, we're going to go back to the game and continue on whatever my notes say. I'll explain them later. Okay, bye. Right, so we're back in the world, and I'm just going to show maybe one of the best engines. So we'll spawn the only one I really have on my list. I don't have any of the other ones. Oh, actually, no. I remember what I was going to do. I was going to show you the testing method. Right, okay. We're going to take this engine here. This is one just I made. It's just a big timer engine thing. So we're just going to paste it there. So that I've just mounted it and it runs. So firstly, to measure the bearings, I just look here. That's the amount of bearings. For the amount of pistons, I'll go and I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4, or like say in my engine, I'm having a bit of a. In my engine, these pistons are needed to just give some redundancy to the rest of the pistons in the engine. So I count them as actually being required to function. So there'd be 16 pistons actually causing this engine to function in this one. And now also I measure the volume just like how I did before, just like so. And then I just, width, height, length. And to measure RPM, I use a mod called Advanced Xometer. So I'll open it up, change the state. So now I can read it on my HUD. And what I'll do is I'll just cycle it so it doesn't actually count that initial kick. And so the moving average on the right is what I'll look at. So the number on the left is the degrees per second, and the number on the right is the RPM. And so that's just part of the moving average, and then I'll just measure the RPM, and then it settles at 2000. It settled at 2019, and then I'll take that as the actual average RPM of the engine. So you can see actually in the live update feed up the top, you can see it's incredibly variable. And so if I do see that it jumps around like that, or I can see the highest value is a lot higher than the average value, I will then say, oh, it's a somewhat unstable engine. Okay, and so the next test that I do is testing with this dyno machine. So this will allow me to figure out the torque of the engine. That still has that on. There we go. So what I'll usually do is I'll paste it like so. I'll then, off the actual chassis of the engine, or a solid piece, something that doesn't move, I'll just take a stick off like that. This is all in Ben Bingo describes this in his creation description. So I'm just trying to follow that as best I can. And then what I'll do is I'll go over here, I'll grab this, and then I'll stick it onto there. And so now the engine is all hooked up and it's ready to go. So what I'll do then is, as he describes, I'll start it spinning, and I'll press this button and I'll mash this a couple times, and I'll run across and I'll watch this number. That is, it's not very complicated, but it's what I do. And I do it for every engine. Most of them are incredibly similar. One of them, when I connected it to this engine and I then, when I connected it to this engine and then I had to start it, it wouldn't actually rotate into the correct position. So I just had to use an electric engine to rotate the engine into the correct position for it to actually to be able to start. And then I started the test. And so that's what I did there. And so yeah, honestly, like sometimes if I can see the engine slowing down, I just won't watch it, or I'll just mash this a couple more times, because if it slows down, this dyno machine, it will stop reading it. So hitting the red button makes it continue spitting out the actual Newton meters torque of the engine at that speed, at the lower RPM. And so if it's continuously going like this, I'll just fiddle around. I'll do something. I'll build a little statue or something and then I've just got it out of the corner of my eye. I'll just watch it, just trying to catch when it goes, and I'll like look up and I'll be like and I'll go back something. So we could just making sure. And then, oh, this is nice. This because a little hole in the center. I'm watching. And so, yeah. And then sometimes the tests run for a very long time. The locking crank ran for just so long because it wouldn't stop. It just kept on going. And now this one keeps going. This is just, I wanted to make just an over-the-top design with 4 pistons on each sort of plane like this. This is the same as like a normal i3, just multiplied 4 times. And so that means that these front row of pistons, since they're being fired by the timer, can actually help continuously. Oh yeah, so it glitches a bit, but it can hit. Okay, well, before it did that, I'll say before it did that, it hit around 4,800, something like that. So if it glitches like this, what I'll do maybe is I'll go here. I'll go across before my game breaks. Why is it so laggy? And then I'll just delete this. And I completely forgot. Okay. If I put it on a lift, the whole test restarts. So that's the problem there. But so that's just normally how I will test the machines. And so, yeah, I don't have much more to show. Actually, we'll do a live testing. I don't think I've tested this one. So, just as a proper example. So I will look at the design. I'll say it has 24 bearings. That's okay. Okay, 14 pistons. Let me see. Well, I know this, I don't know what that is, but I know that this is the actual engine. So I'll say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a 6-piston engine. What is this? Okay. And then I'll set her running. Sort of like that, and see that it works. And so I'll document those 2, and then I'll come over here. I'll say, oh, okay, the volume is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times. I'll count that as an extra space. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 7 times 4. And then we'll go from there. So 7 times 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 7 times 4 times 12. That is the actual volume of the center bit. I'm not counting the struts. I try to be very reasonable in my calculation. I don't just like, oh, yes, mine looks like a couple thousand cubic blocks. And so what I do then is I can see this engine's a bit big, so I'll just run it off like that, and then I'll connect it to the dyno. I kind of just connected it into the ground there, like so. And if it's a smaller engine, I'll connect this up, and then I'll just go do the RPM testing at the same time. Just because if it's smaller, it can handle it. My computer can handle it. I don't have an amazing computer. It's just good enough to do what I want it to. And then I'll start it running, like so. Mash that, drop that a bit. Go over to this side, and that'll run. So I don't know how 2 of these are going to fare in the same world. I think my frames are still doing okay. So only on the smaller engines do I do tests at the same time. The much larger ones, I think what will happen is if I do test them at the same time, it'll really mess the physics calculations. It'll mess with the torque and the RPM. It's only the very small ones that are like 2, 3 pistons, unless they like rotate at 4,000 RPM. Then I'm gonna do those tests separate because I want to make sort of an ideal environment for each. Yeah, my game's not handling this very well. So in this one, I definitely do the 2 separately. And that's just obviously going to cap out at some point, but we don't care about that at the moment because I think I've already done that one. But yeah, that's basically the whole process. I do want to get a couple more people involved because I can keep making my own, and I can keep talking to like the three three other of my three other people, the 3 friends I have that also play Scrap Mechanic, and get them to make some engines and stuff and make some different designs. But the more people I can get in, the more engines I can benchmark, and then from there I want to also do analysis of the engines and see what I'll like standardize the connection. Like, oh, this is a inline 3 stroke 2 connection, sort of a thing. So yeah, like say you had something like this. Like oh, I didn't even put one in the middle there. That's a round collision box. So you have something like this, and then you can imagine that maybe the sensors will be where I put those curve pieces. But then this type of connection is like the axle, and so it's it's an offset axle for an inline 3 engine and stuff like that. And so I don't know. I just think there's a way to standardize engine making or figure it out. And I think maybe the Kine engines have kind of done that. But there's plenty of different designs to look at. Just sort of figuring out maybe what's best, or what best suits a particular purpose, or like if you have a really small efficient one, or another purpose is to, obviously beat the like gas and electric engines into the dust and stuff, and then show them what's what. But at the moment I'm just chilling, just kind of figuring out stuff. But yeah, that's my hope one day. I am approaching the end of the video now. I don't have much more to cover. And yeah, that's the end of the video. I don't have anything left. I've covered everything I want to. And so yeah, I will see you in the next one. Wait. I have a Discord. I completely forgot. I have a Discord, and I want people to join it if you want to. And if you upload the designs, it'll be an easy place to get sort of designs together and interact and kind of think of stuff. And yeah, no, just I'll put the link in the description and I'll pin it in a comment. Yeah, catch you later. Remember, the true lesson is family. Bye.